cactus and succulent growers, I'm Lynn. Welcome to Desert Plants of Avalon in the north of Ireland. And today's video is going to be a repotting of my fairy tail cactus, also known as Acanthocereus tetragonus, also Cereus hildmannianus. And I hope you enjoy the little repotting with me. So here is my little fairy tale cactus here, and this very common little cactus is known as Acanthocereus tetragonus or Cereus hildmannianus. And in my experience, there's three sort of different types of this little monstrose form of Acanthocereus, and I've got the sort of goldeny browny spined variety, but it's most commonly seen as the little white spined, white areoled felted spined variety of fairy tale cactus. You can also get one that's sort of like a pale yellow spined as well. And what's interesting about mine is that when it's in active growth, these little brown spines here, the areoles where the spines come out of, go quite white and have a prominent sort of white areoles about them. But as the cactus sort of ages, because it's in resting period at the moment and it is quite shriveled, once it fattens up and comes into active growth, these little brown spines where the areoles are, they go much more whiter, which is interesting because I haven't really found any other growers that say that. This one is very dehydrated at the moment because it's it's been going through its winter rest. I haven't watered it at all since September. And once I water this, it's going to really plump up again and come into active growth. But I want to repot it first. And by repotting it now, it's going to give it a chance to sort of settle into its new pot before I start watering again in a few weeks' time. Because this has been in my office and grow room, which is warm here in the winter time, I'll probably start this up with earlier watering than what I normally would do with any of my plants in the polytunnel. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about this particular cactus that's known as the fairy tale cactus. It's called the fairy tale cactus for the obvious reasons, because it does look like a little sort of castle and quite a unique looking little cactus. And it is a monstrose form of Acanthocereus and Cereus hildmannianus. There's actually quite a lot of many different names of this cactus. There's apparently, some people say that they're not all the same variety, there's different types, but I'm just classing this down as the one type, as the fairy tale cactus, because they group some of these in many different names as well. The most common one will be Acanthocereus tetragonus and Cereus hildmannianus, but there's far too many for me to mention in this video. And it's a very slow sort of growing cactus, very sort of small. It's never one that's going to grow really massive like the normal variety, the normal growing versions of this would be. So if you want to get flowers, I wouldn't recommend getting the fairy tale cactus, because although it's not impossible for it to flower, it's unlikely to flower in cultivation because monstrose forms of cacti are much harder to get to flower in general. So if you've got this cactus and you want more of them, propagation, the best way would be from cuttings, in my opinion. So bear that in mind. If you want flowers, I probably wouldn't recommend getting this one. And usually you'll only see flowers on these monstrose forms that have to be at least 10 years old before you're likely to get flowers. Now, a bit about the care. They can take a little bit more shade as well. In fact, with mine, in my experience, when I have this out in the polytunnel in the spring or summer months, it goes a little bit yellow, and I think it's one that does like to have a bit more shade. You might hear it likes full sun. It can take full sun if there's plenty of ventilation, but I give mine a little bit more shade. So a very bright position with part sun, I think, suits this particular cactus more in my experience. Otherwise it tends to go yellow. They're also one of the most prone to mealybug type of cacti you can get. I'm always having to go over mine and remove mealybugs. And if you see any white on here, which you may do, it's not mealybugs now, it's Diatomaceous earth, because I have to treat this regularly with rubbing alcohol, and then I always have to dab it, sprinkling of Diatomaceous earth, and it sort of tends to gather a little bit in the tops there, but it seems to do the job. It keeps mealybugs away and at bay. So if you have this cactus, do bear in mind it's a mealybug magnet, so do keep on top of it. And they're like a very well draining cactus and succulent soil, which is what I've got here, and I'm going to be potting it up in. So do make sure that you don't just use normal household compost that holds water. You want to use a cactus soil that is very well draining, such as this. When you push it together with your hands, it comes away easy like that, and it doesn't clump and stay damp. So it's a well draining soil that needs. And obviously repot about once or twice a year whenever you need to. This is well outgrown its pot, desperate for a repot now. And bit of fertiliser. I like to use a bit of tomato feed in the spring and summer, usually about once a month. As I say, I use tomato feed to encourage flowering, but I think it's going to be a very long time before I'll see flowers on mine anyway. But the tomato feed I use with all of my cacti and succulents. I think it's a good general all-rounder, and I use it at half the strength that they recommend using for tomatoes. And that's pretty much it. So that's a bit of a quick little care guide on these rather unique and wacky little miniature monstrose growing fairy tale cactus. Now the soil mix I've made, I've got the next size pot up, is usually around 3 equal parts of a loam based soil. I use John Innes number 2 mixed with horticultural sand and a horticultural grit. In this case I've added a little bit of perlite as well to it, just to make the soil extra sort of draining. But most important thing is that the soil is loose, and that gives it plenty of variation for the roots. So anyway, enough of my waffling. Now to get repotting. First thing I'm going to do is obviously remove it from its pot and loosen up the root ball by squeezing the little pot. And I'm not using gloves because this one is not sharp at all, as you can see. It's sort of more like fine, sort of hairy spines rather than sharp spines. Great. Let's turn it up, see what it looks like. Wow, it's quite root bound there. So I'm just going to very lightly loosen up the soil, just so it's going to make it easier when I pot it up into the new soil. I'm using more or less exactly the same soil anyway. So I'm not going to, I personally don't like to disturb the lower part of the roots. If this was very, very, very root bound there, I'd have to gently tease this, but in my experience, the more I just leave things, the better. So I'm just going to gently, with a blunt toothpick, loosen up this soil here. You also want to make sure that when you are repotting cactus, that you do check that the root system, there's no signs of any root pests. The most common one being root mealybugs. And as you can see, this is perfectly okay. And I can tell because with root mealybugs, they leave a little white deposit on the lower side. Also, you can often tell in the pots as well, they leave a bit of a white hue. And root mealybug sort of has almost like a neon-y, bluey white appearance to it. It's quite prominent, but there's no problem with this. So this is pretty good. And I've removed a bit of the soil around there. So then now what I'm going to do is put a bit of soil at the bottom here. And then gently put this in. Happy days. Perfect. Might put a little bit more soil actually into that. You want to make sure you don't go up to a pot too much bigger. And that's because when you have a lot of soil around a cactus, if the roots are quite shallow with cacti and you put it into too deep of a pot, then in my experience you can get problems such as root rot and things like that if there's too much soil around the roots. So I always just prefer just to go up one size up when it comes to repotting cacti. As you can see, it's not too small of a pot, but it's not too big of a pot size up either. And once I repot cacti, I always like to leave it at least 10 days to 2 weeks before I start to water again, even if I'm repotting cacti in the middle of the summer. And it is still winter now at the moment, so I am going to keep this drier than normal, but it's in my grow room, which is warm, and I'm going to start probably watering up some of the cacti and succulents that I've got in my grow room probably in the next couple of weeks, probably the end of February, because some of them are looking a bit shriveled, and because they're warm in the grow room and some of them are coming into growth, no problem. All the cacti in the polytunnel I won't be starting up with watering until the April time, unless we happen to have a very warm March. Wishful thinking. So that's easy enough there. And just gently tap just to make sure it's gone down the sides. And what I like to do then is use the blunt end of a spoon. You can use anything that's blunt, just to tap in, press down there. It's squeezing, you can see the soil going down, to make sure that it's all down the sides. And you won't believe how this cactus fattens up. So it's very shriveled now, but I don't worry, because shriveled cacti soon plump back up again once you start to water them. Quite remarkable, the difference. So happy days. That's that one there. Just gently tap it. And I've got the label, Acanthocereus. And as I say, there's quite a few different names with this fairy tale cactus. So correct me if I don't have the exact... I don't know whether... As I say, there's a few different types. I'm not an expert on Acanthocereus. This is the only really one I have. I do have some larger growing varieties of the normal monstrose variety, but this is the only one I've got of the fairy tale cactus. A happy days, all nicely happy and repotted. So I hope you enjoyed that little repotting. And do you have any fairy tale cactus in your collection? Do let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't done already, then do please subscribe and click that notification bell. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at Desert Plants of Avalon for lots of photographs, especially when all these cacti and succulents come into flower. And also do check my website out, desertplantsofavalon.com, for regular blogs of what I'm getting up to, and also lots of care tips on there. desertplantsofavalon.com. I want to wish you all a fantastic plant-powered day.